Welcome to 20 Minutes with 2020, our weekly podcast segment where we cover various cannabis industry topics ranging from breeding, growing, marketing, and just anything in general relating to the beautiful plant that we all love. I am joined today by the founder of 2020, Adam. Hello, Adam. How are you doing, brother?
Hey, Carlos, pretty good, man. Thank you.
Well, it's been a really long week. We just had a drop recently, Whistling Moon Traveler, Avenue of the Giants, and the pre-98 Bubba restock that seemed to do pretty well. Any thoughts on that?
It was an exciting week. It was really cool to get some of those strains that were really excited to get out into the world. Finally out there, and we've got Girl Crush dropping here on the 21st of October. So just pretty shortly, another week and a half. So, and then after that, it's going to be a little quiet on the drops for a while. So I don't know if we've got official plans for the next upcoming one, but probably be at least 6 weeks, I would say, till the next drop.
Yeah, we have several surprises up our sleeves. So everybody make sure to sign up for our email list. I cannot suggest that any more strongly than that. I guess I used that totally wrong, but you guys know what I mean. So today we will be covering IPM, or integrated pest management, its uses, and general practices when it comes to cannabis growing. So Adam, being that we come from an outdoor California background, I assume it's pretty safe to say that we are familiar with all kinds of bugs.
I think it's safe to say we're familiar with most of the prolific cannabis pests in that are in our climate, and so I think that there's plenty of other pests that don't survive in our climate that other people have to deal with, but certainly the main cannabis pests, yes, we're quite familiar with.
Well, just to give the people a definition of IPM, it's basically a strategy that focuses on the prevention of pests or their damage through a combination of techniques such as biological control, habitat manipulation, or the use of resistant varieties. Now, I know that there are several ways in which one can attack pests. So where do we want to begin today, Adam?
Well, I mean, I can just try to. I think you and I had this discussion beforehand, and one of the first things I told you is that I'm not an expert in IPM by any means. Now, there's people out there that are going to have very specific advice for lots of different pests and pathogens, and down to brands and spray regimens and all sorts of things like that. So, and it's not really the point. I'm not out to really kind of get down to the nuts and bolts of it, but to try and just give a basic overview of our experience with pests, how that's changed over the years, how of course the rules have changed with what we're allowed to use, and also just the development and evolution of these bugs themselves have changed as well. So and the pathogens and the general spread of them. So I think that's the in a nutshell the outline of the 20-minute talk here.
Okay, so being that you've been doing this for a very long time, could you explain how things have changed over the years concerning pests and cannabis pests specifically?
Yeah, certainly. So one thing that I have learned is that we're never going to win we're never going to win this war. It's going to be a continuous battle forever. And that's partly because nature bats last. The evolution of these the the strength of these tiny little creatures is actually quite exceptional, and that they have the ability to um, to evolve very quickly and become basically better than us in a lot of ways. And so um, that's one thing, I've noticed over the years, is that essentially there's a new pest every few years, and it's been a continuous journey for a long time. And so I remember the days of spider mites were the end all and the be all, and that was really the only pest that we really ever had problems with. And then it certainly, more bugs were either introduced to the area from outside the area, or evolved to uh, adapted to becoming to cannabis being an important part of their diet or their life cycle. So um, and then of course the regulation has been a big thing for us, in that um, the California standards for pest control are actually very stringent, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. It's one of the best things that legalization has brought forth, is basically clean cannabis. And um, but it's been a heck of a learning curve for all of us in the business. So we've learned to you basically use natural methods that are legal. Legal as in following the strict protocol of the chemicals that are allowed to be used. And for the most part, you can assume that most of these types of processes don't work as well as the chemicals themselves. So again, it's a good thing. I don't look down upon it, and we've embraced it, and I think most of the farms that we know have. And um, so it's been yeah, a lot's changed, but particularly the bugs change every year, and the methods at which we have to use to take care of them changes.
So, what would be some of the general practices that you can impart on our listeners as far as techniques that they should implement as far as a regimen in the grow room?
Yeah, so I can't stress enough that it's all about preventative maintenance, and that's if pretty much that's the standard basic guidelines of all IPM schedules is preventative maintenance. It's not waiting for the pathogens or the pests to show up. It's basically to be proactive and assuming that they're there even when you don't see them. Now, one of the biggest um, things that I see, and even in our business and many other businesses facilities, is the tendency, the human tendency to overcorrect, to oversteer. So essentially, you get infestation, and then you basically go nuts with some sort of cure regimen, whatever spray, and then you end up actually causing more damage than the bugs themselves cause, because you're so rigorously trying to deal with the bugs, and then you maybe get gun shy on it because you damage the plants from being so proactive with trying to get rid of the bugs, that you actually then you have another infestation because you we're too cautious. So the key is the middle of the road, staying in the center of the road, and having a regimen that is healthy for your plants, yet something that you can do on a schedule. And if you do that, it's very unlikely that you get any sort of infestation, and that can be with some rather inert type sprays. And of course, with outdoor, there's companion plants, as we spoke about earlier, which that's lots of information on that online, and companion plants certainly work. And then of course, predator insects, which we're also a big fan of, and uh, a variety of different predator insects, and they definitely work. And maybe we should talk about that in another question, or even a whole nother 20-minute forum possibly. Uh, but I'll move past that for now. Maybe we'll come back to it.
Well, you touched on something briefly that I want to impart on everyone, and that is that if you can see the pest, you likely already lost the war. But what do you do when you can't see the pest? And specifically, I would love for you to touch on the famous russet mite infestation of 2015, 2016 in California.
Yeah, that was quite a disaster, and I think we all kind of laugh about it now, but we certainly weren't laughing about it in 2016, which is, I believe, the year that it hit us. It's kind of a funny story now. Again, it wasn't that funny then. But what happens in Northern California, we started hearing about these so-called russet mites that were hitting a lot of areas in Oregon, and they were apparently airborne, and they basically, you know, more or less microscopic, and they caused a tremendous amount of damage to the plants, and you basically couldn't see the bugs. So I think what happened to us is the exact same thing that happened to all the other farms that we know that got russet mites, is that everyone, they just said, no, I don't have russet mites. No, I don't have russet mites. All of a sudden you start having all these really strange problems with your plants. They kind of would get this like strange shaped, the leaves would start growing these real strange shoots, and then the trichome production would just drop dramatically, and you'd have these plants that had like basically no trichomes on them, and you're like, wait, this is, something's wrong. And finally, lo and behold, a neighbor or a friend is like, you got russet mites, buddy. And then after that, quickly you become an expert in russet mites, and and then you're kind of the next neighbor or friend telling the next guy, like, oh, you got russet mites. So the funny story that I wanted to share about that was actually, that was in the early days of when we had to sign up with the local county sheriff to come. The Mendocino County Sheriff would actually come out and like approve our garden, and it was really quite awkward, as anyone can imagine, that you're going into the sheriff office and signing up to like have them come and inspect your garden. And the gentleman shows up at our facility, and at that point we were just an outdoor garden, and he basically takes a mug shot of you. I mean, I convinced it's just for fun, because they basically make you stand in front of your tallest plant, and then turn left, turn right, face the camera, take a picture of you. In the meantime, the cop's pretty much like smiling the whole time. And then anyways, he actually was like, so do you guys have russet mites yet? And we're like, no, we don't have russet mites. But he's like, well, pretty much every farm I see has them, and you probably do have them, you just don't know about it. And so he leaves, and I don't think it was much more than a few weeks later that we started seeing problems. Of course, we blamed him for bringing them, but that was kind of our internal joke. But yeah, I mean, he nailed it, because we did that year. They hit us really, really bad, and so that was back to my statement about preventative maintenance. If we had been using even very inert type sprays, and even water for that sake, it helps. But any sort of management, we would have never had that problem, and it would have saved us a tremendous amount of money and heartache. Um, but that's part of the lessons learned, and that's one thing about pest management, is it's a never-ending lesson learned. So um, yeah, the russet mites, from what I understand, they're still sweeping across the nation and causing the same problems all around. So if you start to see some really weird looking plants and you can't quite explain it, pull out your scope, and if you get them once, you get forgiven. If you get them twice, then you messed up. And so I recommend the preventative maintenance if you want to keep from getting russet mites, because they will make it to you eventually.
Yeah, that was a crazy year. I remember that our banana kush was the only thing that was spared from their damage, correct?
I'm glad you reminded me of that. Yes, so that is one thing. As with all pests and all cannabis, certain strains do much better. They're either more resistant to the pests themselves, or the pests just don't like that particular strain, possibly the terpenes or something chemically about them. But yeah, the banana kush, which we still have in some of our lines, although I don't think we've actually released any thing, but we will be at some point. One of our kind of all-time favorite, really outdoor strains, and that strain was really spared. And I can't explain why. It wasn't a particular section of the garden because there would be a banana kush plant surrounded by super infested plants and here and there throughout the garden, and it just really persevered through it. So that's definitely kind of back to the fact that you've got certain strains that are just going to do better against certain pests. So that is part of IPM, is actually planning to grow uh, strains that can handle certain environments or pests, and that includes pathogens, which bud rot or um, uh, different types of root rot issues and stuff are all very strain specific as well.
Well, I know that we come at this from a commercial point of view, but a lot of our listeners are growing in smaller rooms or even tents. So, how do pests compare between larger facilities and more hobbyist setups?
Well, it's a good question. So it's always easier to control the issues and to deal with the issues in a smaller facility or a smaller room, um, for the simple facts that you have a much smaller area to disinfect, to clean. If you do get an infestation, to basically eliminate everything and start over, all the way to just having less inputs, so less things coming in general. A lot of these, especially little mites and small pests, can actually come in the soil bag, or on the soil bag, or on your clothes. And so when you have a larger facility and you've got multiple people visiting and you've got lots of different inputs in general, just stuff coming in, then the odds go up much higher to get these type of issues. And so in general, smaller is easier. So uh, that's the good news. Also your loss is less. So if you do take a hit, it's a much smaller hit. But certainly the key point, I think, is that um, if you do get an infestation of anything, and you're in a small area, a small room, a small tent or something, you can deal with it. So have faith that don't lose hope. It can definitely be the problem can be cured.
Well, I kind of want to touch on something related. We deal with a lot of, or we implement a lot of beneficial insects in our programs, and I know that some some of our regiments seem to do better in our smaller breeding facility as opposed to our larger licensed flower facility. So, um, which bugs do you like to use, and in which situations do you implement them?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the key with beneficial insects is comparing um, their preferred temperature ranges and climate with that of your facility, and only investing in the insects that are compatible with that environment. And it's the biggest mistake that people make with uh, with beneficial bugs in general, including us. And we've made this mistake before, is just kind of dumping a bunch of money into these things, and then realizing that most of them aren't even going to reproduce or even possibly even live in that particular environment. And if you look at most of the places you can purchase these at, um, you'll see that they actually list that. It's not even in the fine print. It's usually pretty obvious on the description about exactly the type of area that, or I'm sorry, environment that they're going to be best suited in. So we now, here's a good example: ladybugs. Ladybugs, by far the most common uh, beneficial insect. What we've learned is, and I think many people have probably learned this lesson as well, ladybugs do not do good anywhere where there's basically really big facility with especially with HID lights or like HPS lights, because they're attracted to the light, and those lights are super hot, and they end up just flying up into the sun and burning and falling down and dying. And so you can dump a lot of money into ladybugs and just basically watch them die in front of you, and generally not deal with the problem. Whereas I've seen ladybugs do an exceptional job eliminating bugs in small tents, or really small areas with LED lights where they can't get burned or killed by the lighting. So um, that's a good example of a situation where it's very insect specific. We've also taken a liking to assassin bugs, Zalus renardi. They're fast, they're mean, they have a huge climate, which is probably the biggest thing that kind of got me attracted to them early on, was that they have a huge climate range. I mean, it's like, I want to say it's like 45 degrees or 40 degrees to like 100 and 110 or something crazy. I mean, it's like practically all like normal normal plant uh, uh, climate ranges. So they're fast, they're aggressive, they eat everything, and they we actually see them working. And that's one of the things with beneficial insects. A lot of people get turned off because some of them are tiny or microscopic, and once you let them go, they're just basically gone. You never see them again. So um, we'll talk about this more. I believe we can really probably have a whole nother talk on beneficial insects. Although I'm not an expert in this, I've certainly got quite a bit of experience trying different types over the years. I'll mention one last kind of uh, really common one is the green lacewing larva, which you buy as either an egg or a larva or an adult that lays eggs. And they're real aggressive against aphids. And as many of you either know or are about to learn, is that there's a hemp aphid or a cannabis aphid that's becoming quite prolific throughout the cannabis community. And if it isn't there yet, I promise you it will be eventually. And they're an interesting bug. We're dealing with them. They're really hard to just completely eliminate from a big facility. But the good news is they don't do a tremendous amount of damage. They're more just gross and annoying and pestering. They can certainly cause damage, but a fairly inert bug as long as you're kind of keeping them from completely taking over. But the good news is they're slow and they're soft. They're soft. They don't have like a hard shell. So basically, almost every beneficial uh, predator bug can eat them. So uh, yeah, maybe we should have a whole nother talk on predator bugs here in the future.
Yeah, this was totally like a real surface uh, conversation on IPM. So we're reaching our time limit. Let's conclude with this question. Most growers have to deal with insects and pathogens on any given day. Which do you consider worse when it comes to overall damage?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and the I don't really I hate to even give an answer on it, but I will say that that microbial pathogens are definitely a silent killer, in that most people never know that that's their problem, and what they're 9 times out of 10 doing is assuming that they're having some fertilizer issues or some soil issues, basically blaming everything else except for the actual root of the problem, which is some sort of microbial pathogen. And we've had this problem. We're for us, it's a preventative maintenance thing as well. We have to continuously um, use products to basically defend our root system from these pathogens that are basically just spores in the air in Northern California. And if you don't have them, it's a miracle. And chances are, if you have some sort of issue with your plants and you can't figure out what it is, and everything's the same, your plants, all the inputs are the same as they were before, but your quality's just dropped, and where you have what appears to be some sort of nutrient deficiency or something, there's a very good chance you have some sort of systemic pathogen that's either in the roots or the uh, the vascular system of the plant itself. So I actually think that that the pathogens are worse than bugs. But again, we don't have every bug everybody has, and so I can't speak for everything. But I can tell you, I would rather deal with spider mites or russet mites or aphids than I would with pathogens.
Right on. Well, I think we've reached our time limit. I'd love to remind everybody to follow us on all of our platforms, whether it be Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You guys can check out our website and submit questions. Um, we are definitely going to be putting together a few episodes where we're answering all the questions that you guys submit. I also want to remind everyone that Girl Crush will be released on October 21st. Make sure to visit our website, www.2020mendocino.com, for a list of authorized vendors. I think we're going to have a pretty busy few weeks, and it may be a good idea, Adam, when we get all together soon, to possibly do a video segment of the podcast for the first time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I
Well,
would like to do one at the facility at some point as well. So
most definitely.
I think we're going to be finally getting the team together here soon. So when you get back, we'll let's consider doing some sort of on the ground podcast as well, or video segment.
Definitely. Do you have any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we keep these at 20 minutes on purpose to give nice little short to the point segments, but this whole topic can certainly be broken down into many more 20-minute segments. So I think we covered the general principles now, and let's consider diving into each of these subjects, even as far as going into, let's talk about spider mites this week, and let's talk about russet mites and aphids, and they can literally get their own their own 20-minute week. So let's shoot to keep this kind of subject going, and we encourage people to write in with questions, and we do our best to incorporate those questions into our podcast.
Definitely. Maybe we can even speak on our secret homemade formula against some of these aphids.
Yeah, for sure.
Right on, man. So thank you guys for listening. We will be back next week. Same time, same place. YouTube, Sunday, 4:20 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you, guys.